Hello and welcome to your social summit. I'm so happy to be here with you. My name is Jen Moore, and I just want to thank Megan for that introduction. And with that, I want to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And here we go. So today I want to talk to you about more plants in your diet, and that is important for every patient from prevention all the way to dialysis. And so these are our objectives for today. So plants, why we all need them. So I'm going to really focus in, everybody needs more plants in the diet, but I'm going to really focus in on kidney disease and why this is important. So the first thing I want to talk about is inflammation. So all patients, you always want to lower inflammation levels. This is really a big deal, but first let's talk about what even is inflammation. So when we talk about inflammation, if you think about an apple, if you slice the apple, it begins to turn brown. That is called oxidation. And that can happen inside every one of our bodies, but especially in chronic kidney disease because there's more toxins in the body. So there's a higher level of inflammation there. It's like this kind of chronic, low grade, ongoing inflammation that people with kidney damage have in their body. And this produces oxidative stress. And so what we want to do, the reason this apple is turning brown is because there are oxidants or free radicals acting on this apple. And so imagine if we took a lemon and we squeezed the juice on the apple. Lemons have a very very potent antioxidant. I'm sure you've probably heard of that word called vitamin C, and they'll stop that browning process. So the same thing is true inside of our bodies. We want to stop those oxidants or free radicals. And so I love this little cartoon because this shows the free radical in the middle. It's just, it's an atom that's missing the electron on the outer shell. And so it's an oxidant. And so the antioxidant comes along and gives it the electron. And so if you think about antioxidants, we need to know where those come from. And those come from fruits and vegetables primarily. And so we need to increase the number of fruits and vegetables in our diet. The next thing I want to talk to you about is acid-base balance. So this is one of the functions of the kidney, but really we need to think about acid-base balance both in pre-end stage and dialysis, because if the kidneys are failing, they're not performing this as well. And if they have failed, they're not performing it at all. So why is acidosis unwanted? Why don't we want this in our body? Well, acidosis contributes to things like muscle wasting, destruction of bone and bone disease, which is something we definitely don't want. We know that people with kidney disease have a lot of issues with bone disease. Low albumin levels. We know there's an increased risk of mortality with lower albumin levels. We certainly don't want that. If you're not on dialysis, an acidotic state, higher acid levels in the blood will increase the rate of progression to CKD. And that's something we're trying to not do. We're trying to keep you off of dialysis. It'll stimulate inflammation, which we just said we don't want to have, and then impair insulin secretion and sensitivity. So for diabetics, that's definitely not something that we want. So what do we need to know about acidosis? Well, fruits and vegetables are naturally alkalizing. They and you have to think about it, not how the fruit or vegetable is outside of the body. So like we go back to our lemon or an orange, you think of that as being acid outside of the body, but it's what happens when we take it into our body and digest it. What does it become? Well, it becomes more alkaline. So animal products are very acid forming. If you're pre-end stage, I would encourage you to eat a primarily, if not totally, plant-based diet. And if you're on dialysis, you can do that too. You just have to have some help from your dietitian to make sure you're getting enough protein. But there was a study that was done. This is pretty interesting. It was a study in 2012 where we looked at some stage 2 chronic kidney disease patients. They had, and they were given either a sodium bicarbonate supplement. So we know that sodium bicarbonate will alkalize the blood, and we know that we give bicarbonate on the dialysis machine. But they were either given that or just increase the number of fruits and vegetables in their diet. And both of these treatments were intended to lower acid levels. And what we found was that that in both patients, in both groups, the patients' bodies were more alkaline, but the fruit and vegetable group had a lower kidney injury, which is pretty interesting because fruits and vegetables do so many other things besides, they don't just do one thing. Like they do help with acidosis, they do help with inflammation, but there's so many other things, even just increasing the nutrient content in your body, giving you more energy and more vitality. So definitely something that we want to do. Now, even if you're on dialysis, you know, on dialysis, we say things like, we want you to watch the amount of phosphorus that you eat. Well, we control phosphorus with the dialysis machine, but we also control it with the diet. And a lot of times we don't talk about acidosis in dialysis patients because we give bicarbonate in the machine. We control it with the machine, but I would say it's still very helpful to eat an alkaline diet. And so how do we know if a food is acid or alkaline? Well, there's something called the potential renal acid load of foods. And basically, if it has a low number, then it produces less acid inside the body. So if you look at this list, fruits and vegetables are very low. They do not produce an acid load, but when you start getting into the animal products, they do. And so especially if you're pre-end stage, this is something that we want to avoid. And what about nutrients? I think a lot of times, especially with the way that we've educated in dialysis over the years, and I've been in this a really long time, is that we've talked about avoiding certain foods, but really what we need to include in that education is what do we need to increase in the diet to increase nutrients? Because you are not just your kidneys. There are other things going on in your body. You want to have a healthy body overall. You want to have healthy lungs. You want to have a healthy heart. You want to have healthy skin and hair. And nutrients are things our bodies need to be overall healthy and avoid other comorbidities that go along with chronic kidney disease. So where do we get nutrients? Well, when I'm talking about nutrients, I'm really talking about micronutrients. There's two types of nutrients. There's macronutrients and micronutrients. So macronutrients are things like carbohydrate, protein, and fat. Most people are pretty familiar with those. So if you look at the chicken leg, it's a very high in protein, a macronutrient, but it's very low in micronutrients like vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytochemicals. Same thing with a bagel. It's a very high in a macronutrient carbohydrate, but it's very low in things like vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals. But if you look over at the right at all the color in the fruits and vegetables, that is how you're going to know something is nutrient dense, as if there's a lot of color. And those are loaded with things you need to lower the inflammation process, to lower acidosis in your body, and to increase nutrients. And so you may be saying, well, I am a kidney patient, and so I have to watch phosphorus and potassium. And what I'm going to tell you is that plants are still okay, especially for phosphorus, because plant-based phosphorus is less bioavailable. It's in the form of phytate, which your body can't even break down. Flesh food, animal products are naturally higher in bioavailable phosphorus, but also we know that flesh foods are injected with phosphorus additives. So one of the worst things about phosphorus is the additives. Those can be found injected in animal products, but also in processed packaged foods. And I know your dietitian on dialysis has probably talked to you about that, but if you're eating a lot of packaged foods, be careful, read the label. Phosphorus won't be written there, but if you look in the list of ingredients and there's anything in that list of ingredients that sounds anything like phosphorus, for example, dicalcium phosphate, you want to stay away from that, because that phosphorus is almost 100% absorbable. And the same is true of the type of phosphorus that's injected into meat products. Also, we know that there's a higher level of FGF23, which is connected to phosphorus, especially pre-end stage. FGF23 goes really high because it causes the body to urinate out phosphorus. But FGF23 also will increase the rate of progression to kidney disease, and it is really bad for your heart. So for all these reasons, it's good to stick with plant-based phosphorus. Now, the one thing we do have to be careful about is potassium, but there are still fruits and vegetables that are lower in potassium that you can include in your diet. And if you're careful, you can even swap out, as you'll see from this chart here, you can swap out certain animal-based proteins for plant-based proteins and still keep your potassium level low, as long as you're working with your dietitian in dialysis. If you're pre-end stage, you don't really have to worry about potassium unless your level goes high, and that is straight from the new KDOQI guidelines. So you don't limit potassium pre-dialysis unless your potassium goes high. One watch out with potassium, I would say, is watch smoothies, juices, sauces, and dried fruit, because those are concentrated sources of potassium, and those will run your potassium up. Also watch things like salt substitutes, because those are, instead of being sodium chloride, they're potassium chloride, and they're concentrated sources of potassium. And then finally, there's certain non-nutritional causes of potassium, like high potassium, like acidosis, which we know we don't want. Things like constipation. If you eat more plants, you'll be less constipated. GI bleeds, infections, all these things can cause high potassium as well. So final thoughts for you today is that I want you to think of yourself as a whole person. I want you to be healthy overall. Yes, I want you to have healthy kidneys if you haven't progressed to kidney failure yet. But even if you're on dialysis, you are still a person. You still have other organs. You still have other things about your body and wonderful things about you that I want you to take very good care of. More plants are better for everyone. Just make sure you're eating the right plants. Make sure you're working with a dietitian to know what those are. And you can certainly fit plants into your life. So anyway, thank you so much for letting me be here with you today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your summit.